smartly and safely. The agreement with the Department of Health, State of New York, Buffalo Bills, will allow fans at the first playoff game that the Buffalo Bills are going to play. The agreement is for 6,700 fans. They'll be socially distanced, masks required, but every fan will be tested before the game. Obviously, if they test positive for the virus, they won't be attending the game, and they'll get the treatment that they need. And then post-game, there'll be contact tracing, so we'll find out exactly what happened, was there any spread at the game, et cetera. Again, this is a pilot to find ways where we can smartly and safely reopen businesses. The partnership that put this together, I thank them all, Department of Health, State of New York, BioReference is the laboratory that's doing all the tests. The Buffalo Bills have been very cooperative and helpful, and we thank them all. Again, the Department of Health will then monitor the day of the game and monitor post-game contact tracing afterwards. For all the Bills fans, please, everyone take these measures seriously. We have made progress on the COVID virus over the past few weeks. The numbers are down. We want to keep them down. People don't have to be malicious to spread the virus. Most of the viral spread is from people who didn't even know they had the virus. So I understand the mood. I feel the mood, the excitement about the Buffalo Bills. It's been a long time, and they have captured a certain energy and charisma that is infectious. But we have to be smart. Not just at the stadium. You have to be smart when you're at home. You have to be smart if you're at a party. You have to be smart if you're at an event. We really have to take this seriously. We don't want the fact that the Bills are in the playoff to wind up being a negative in terms of COVID, right? So no tailgating, no mass gatherings. That's not what we want to see. And it's not good for Buffalo. It's not good for Western New York. It's the last thing that the Bills want to see. So let's just be smart. Two people have worked on this very hard. It's Commissioner Zucker, Dr. Howard Zucker, and the Budget Director, Robert Mujica. That picture of Commissioner Zucker is when he was saying, and for you, Governor, we have a needle this big. That's what the Commissioner was saying. And Robert Mujica has a slightly dour look on his face. That was after the state deficit report. Saying that we have a $15 billion deficit, and that's why he doesn't look happy and peppy. But with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Zucker for some comments on the agreement, and then we're going to be joined by Kim and Terry Pagula to discuss the Bills game. Dr.
Great. Thank you very much, Governor. Under the pilot, which was developed cooperatively, as the Governor said, between the Bills, New York State, and BioReference Laboratory, 6,772 fans will be allowed to attend the game only after first obtaining a negative COVID-19 test result. Contact tracing will also be conducted after the game. This is the first stadium reopening pilot plan in the nation that will require all these measures. Under the plan, the team staff will control all exit and entry points to the stadium, and only fans with a documented negative COVID-19 test will be allowed inside. Testing will be conducted in partnership with the BioReference Lab. Once inside the stadium, fans will be required to wear a mask at all times and adhere to the strict social distancing protocols. Fans who refuse to comply with these protocols will be removed from the stadium. Ushers will also be present throughout the stadium to ensure that all fans are in compliance. As part of the state's review, personnel from the Department of Health traveled to other stadiums outside of New York where similar protocols are in place to confirm their effectiveness. Tailgating remains banned under this plan, and New Yorkers are being reminded to avoid gatherings and parties beforehand, during, and after the game, as these events are primed for viral spread. The Department of Health will monitor the post-game fan testing and contact testing and tracing. And regardless of whether you attend in person or not, be safe, socially distance, wear a mask, no tailgating, no partings of that nature, no large gatherings, and be safe and be smart. We look forward to the game. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Now I turn it over to Robert Mejica, the Budget Director, and I want to thank him very much. As you heard from Dr. Zucker, no state has done this before, and it took a lot of work and a lot of creativity, so thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Dr. Zucker. The plan that we have and the protocols that we put in place were take into account all of the guidance that we have, both from the World Health Organization, from the CDC, from the New York State Department of Health, and other health experts from around the world. As the governor mentioned and Dr. Zucker mentioned, all fans would have to show a negative test 72 hours before. BioReference will be conducting tests in the 2 days prior to the event for 13 hours each day in the parking lots, drive-through testing, and those results will all be back before game day. On game day, fans will have to show evidence of a negative test. The team will also have the results from the tests. They then will have to go through a separate checkpoint where they'll have to show the tickets to enter the stadium. They'll be required to wear masks from the time they exit their vehicles in the parking lots to the time that they re-enter their vehicles and they exit. The fans will be sitting in pods throughout the stadium, so they'll be sitting with the groups for which they came in blocks, and they'll be separated from other fans by rows and other seats. So we think that this plan is the safe way for the Bills to have fans in the stadium. People watching the game in this stadium will probably be the safest out of anywhere in the state watching the game, because they will all have had negative tests. So with that, I think this is going to be an experiment. It'll be the first time, but this plan that's been approved by the Department of Health is the safest way to conduct this, and we look forward to the results.
Thank you very much. I believe if the technology works, which is always a big if, but it works. We have Kim and Terry Pagula who are joining us. Thank you so much. Good to be with you. Good to see you, Terry. Good to see you, Kim. Thank you for all the time you've spent, all the work in putting this plan together. I know it's novel, but everything we do nowadays is novel. But it's another first, and good for New York and good for the Bills. We're glad that we're going to be able to do this and do it together. We are all so excited about the Bills. They have charged the entire state of New York. They have given us good news in a year where we really needed good news. And the team is doing so great, and they play with such a great energy that all New Yorkers are excited about it. And again, I wanted to thank you so much for all the help in putting together this plan. I look forward to seeing you out there. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But thank you. I hope you guys are excited as we are.
Yes. Governor, Kim and I thank you for, and your staff for working diligently with the Bills organization in getting us to this point. As you know, the entire Bills organization misses the energy of our fans at our games. We know they're there, but we want them here, if you know what I mean, at the game. And even though they'll be there in limited numbers, we will feel and definitely soak in their support at this game. And any issues that arise as a result of what we're trying to do here, we will passionately try to resolve to pull this off. And I want to tell our fans, remember, our objective here is to support our team in as many ways as we can. And I ask them to be safe, be smart, and most importantly, be loud. Thank you, guys.
Well, the loud part of Kim, please.
Sorry, no, we know that fans have been waiting 25 years to be able to attend a playoff game, and we are so excited to be able to allow the limited amount of fans that we can. But I want to just say that we are so hopeful that there would be many more games that all fans can attend. And for us to do that, as you mentioned, Governor, we all need to be safe starting today and beyond the game. And we just want to thank you and your team. And we want to just encourage everyone out there, all our fans, that we just need to do our part. Again, wear your mask, being compliant, CDC, social distancing. We all know what needs to be done. We all need to do our part to get it done so that we can have everyone back in our stadium soon.
Well, thank you very much, Terry, and thank you, Kim. And I think that's right. This is a great opportunity to cheer for the Bills, cheer for New York. You're right, it's been a lot of years. And the message is right. Everybody gets it. It's a time to be smart, which helps us and helps everyone. We're in control of our destiny. How we act is going to determine what happens with this virus. And we've seen that when we're smart and we're responsible, we can bring it down. And that's what we're trying to do. So thank you. We're all excited. That New England Patriots game was something. I want you to know that was really something special. So a lot of good energy. As I said, I'm going to take my test. I'm going to be out there to watch the game with you, and we look forward to it. So thank you very much for what you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
We have a message from, we have another special message, I think, if the technology works.
I'm excited to let you guys know we are going to be allowed some fans in our first playoff game. Super excited for it. I want to thank all the parties involved. Obviously the Pagulas, Governor Cuomo, everybody else involved. Thank you so much. Let's please follow guidelines, wear your mask in the stands so we can have you guys for the rest of the way. Go Bills.
Great. Josh Allen, he is playing phenomenal. He really is. Okay, so that is good news and that is exciting news, and we hope that works out all across the board because, again, it would be a great template if we can figure out how to use testing and rapid testing. Rapid testing, you can get the results in 20 minutes from a rapid test. The question is, rather than wait 6, 9, 12 months to reopen the economy, can you start to reopen businesses safely, smartly by using rapid testing? That's the question. Because, again, we can't wait. We can't stay closed down. But we have to be smart and we have to be safe. And that's going to be the path for us to navigate. And that's going to be the path all through 2021, I'm afraid. We have the vaccine. The vaccine is the weapon that will
know that this is the program, this is a platform where we talk about the range of issues of South Asia on environment, climate change, and related public health. And today, we are also going to talk about a very important issue. It's a new year. First of all, I should say Happy New Year to all of you. But this year with happy, we are adding another word, happy and healthy New Year. All of us are so concerned about this COVID. So everybody's writing happy and healthy New Year. So happy and healthy New Year to all my panelists. Happy and healthy New Year to all who are seeing this program. You know, this program is brought on by the Climate Channel, is a Canadian television channel in collaboration with notvbangla, a YouTube channel, and the Plural, that's an Indian media platform. So that's the structure here. And before I go for the South Asian news and then we'll come to the discussion. Today's subject is that what is going to happen in 2021. We call it Agenda 21. All of us who are in climate change know Agenda 21. So Agenda 21, pandemic and beyond. That's today's discussion. We'll be going to talk about what happened last year, what is going to happen this year. And my panelists, I have a fabulous panel. I'm very lucky with a very fabulous panel with me. We have with me Javed Ahmed Khan. Javed Saab is the Minister of Disaster Management and Civil Defense, Government of West Bengal, India. He has been the minister for the last 10 years. Not only for that, he is here because he will be talking about Amphan, the biggest cyclone to hit the world this year, the costliest cyclone in one of the poorest part of the world. So we'll be hearing from Javed Saab what has happened at that point of time and how he's planning to counter any such future endeavors, future events. So Javed Saab is with us. We have with Dr. Saleemul Haque. Dr. Saleemul Haque is one of the noted climate expert, climate scientist. He's with the ICCCAD, and he's also the advisor to the least developed countries, one of the frontline negotiation person in the UN negotiation structure. So Dr. Haque, thank you for being in the program. Thank you for very much, Jayanta. So, thank you, Jayanta. And I have also with me Dr. Sejal Worah. Dr. Sejal Worah is the program director, WWF India. And I think for long, Dr. Worah has been talking and working in biodiversity, in environmental issues, and a lot of issues. And we have learned so many things from Dr. Worah. Dr. Worah, so kind of you to make time for this program.
Thank you, Jayanta.
Thank you for being part of the program. It's a great privilege to have you. And finally, I have that person without whom this program is incomplete. Professor Rajiv Dasgupta. Professor Rajiv Dasgupta is from JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, India. He is an expert in public health and part of the many vaccine and vaccination committees, including the polio one in Government of India. And from him today, we'll be knowing about what is going on in not only in India, but in South Asia in the vaccination sector. What are the situation? So that's the panel for me. So before I start with Dr. Rajiv Dasgupta, perhaps before that, very quickly, I run through some of the major news this week for all of you, mainly in South Asia. The extreme weather events are turning costly. A recent report published by Christian Aid has found that extreme weather events driven by climate change cost the world billions in 2020. Almost all the event had cost more than $5 billion each, and each of them having, as I said, more than 5 billion, and only in US, due to hurricanes and fire, more than 60 billions were lost. And very interestingly, China lost 32 billion for flood, and also India lost 10 billion for flood. And more interestingly, 6 out of these 10 events happened in Asia, with Cyclone Amphan that had struck Bay of Bengal region, including mainly India, the West Bengal state of India, and then also Bangladesh. That was the costliest cyclone. 13 billions were lost within few days. So that's all about the extreme weather events. Now, COVID has catered to some environmental advantages. According to a very recently released Central Pollution Control Board data in India, there was a significant improvement in air quality during the lockdown. Lockdown is considered from March 22nd to May 18th. It's in PM 2.5. You know, PM 2.5 is one of the major pollutant. 50% reduction in Delhi, and also the 5 most polluted cities in India, who are also part of the global top 10 most polluted cities. I mentioned Ghaziabad, Delhi, Noida, Greater Noida, and Gurgaon. The reduction is 50%. So COVID has some advantages somewhere down the line. Delhi is turning cool. The average minimum temperature in Delhi in December was the second lowest in 15 years, according to the India Meteorological Department data. The data released by IMD recently showed that minimum temperature, we call it MMT, this December was 7.1 degrees Celsius. It was 7.6 degree last year. The MMT for December in Delhi dipped below 7 degrees Celsius only once in the last 15 years. That was in way back when it was 6.7 degrees centigrade many years back, 2004 or 5, like that. So it was said that clear skies over Delhi NCR, multiple western disturbances affecting the Himalayan region, and the global impact of La Nina, Dr. Hawk will talk about that, were stated to be the major reasons behind such low minimum temperatures. And finally, Bangladesh. Biomass burning and construction have found to be the major sources of indoor and outdoor pollution, respectively, in Bangladesh. According to the findings of a recently published study by the Environment and Social Development Organization, it was found that biomass burning make up 41% of all indoor pollutants, while construction materials are responsible for 38% of all outdoor air pollutants. So those are the major news, some of the major news from the region, and we'll be discussing all those. So without any further ado, I go over to Dr. Dasgupta. Dr. Dasgupta, when are the vaccines coming? That's the questions you all have. Where do we stand on the vaccines, COVID vaccines in South Asia? Very briefly.
Well, to give you a thumbnail view of the picture in South Asia, as most of you would be aware, one vaccine has been licensed for emergency use in India and another one is expected soon. Trials are ongoing for 6 to 7 candidate vaccines, some of them being indigenously developed in India and some developed in partnership with other global partners, including some of the US universities. The good news here is that India's vaccine production capability is certainly the big story in the region.
Okay.
What it also means is that India will have to prioritize both its domestic population as well as the South Asian neighbors for supplying of the vaccine, plus also be able to market it in the global vaccine market.
Okay.
So therefore, countries such as Bhutan, Nepal, Myanmar, Sri Lanka are in dialogue. This is also at least projected to be a big soft power moment from the Indian perspective. And there is certainly the potential, and it's in the air, of a new kind of regional collaboration. The first target, more or less, for each country, each of these countries, is to be able to, in the first step, be able to immunize about 20% of the population.
Okay.
Of course, prioritizing health workers, other frontline workers, and other at-risk groups. And the final issue, we can talk about it later, is the financing mechanism. So some of these countries will be purchasing, some of these countries is looking for aid-related support. For India, the first 300 million beneficiaries will be supported by the central government or the federal government. And some countries such as Bhutan are part of the WHO's initiative of procuring the vaccine. This is really the thumbnail view.
What is happening, say, around the countries like, say, Bangladesh? Is Bangladesh and India in talks? Are they in talks?
Yes, of course. Bangladesh and India is in talks. Bangladesh is preparing its logistics capacities, and Bangladesh expects, at least by available news, the first delivery towards the end of January, certainly within January, and Bangladesh should be launching its immunization campaign either in late January or certainly by early February, most likely in January. Each country actually wants to get off the block sometime during the second half of January. India, of course, will do it earlier, perhaps sometime next week after the dry runs are over.
Okay, so India will be doing almost right away. How much time India will take? Say,
India's
in the first week of
phase
Jan.
one. India's phase one, which is 300 million beneficiaries, of whom 10 million are health workers and 20 million are other frontline workers, including disaster relief personnel, defense personnel, civilian police personnel, and municipal workers, most importantly. This is the first priority group. And the 300 million beneficiaries, which is a total of 600 million doses, is likely to be completed by June, July of 2021.
Okay, so by June, July, this initial lot will be completed. You expect that?
That's the current plan.
That's the current plan. And before I go over to the next speaker, just a very quick question. There are issues of efficacies of various vaccines. So as of now, which of the vaccines you feel are on there to be kind of vaccinated for vaccination?
Well, as we speak, as you know, the vaccine, the AstraZeneca, which is going to be produced and supplied by the Serum Institute of India, has been approved. The trial for the ICMR Bharat Biotech is being accelerated so that the data is available for review. And the government, the national government, is certainly urging all other companies who are in the trial phase to accelerate the trial, to submit the data, and it's on scrutiny of data that the final go-ahead will be given. But this is strictly for India, and other countries will either approve it on the basis of the Indian approval or other global approvals such as UK or EU and so on.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dasgupta. I think we'll be knowing more about it when we'll be coming back to you. But let me now go over to Javed Saab first. Javed Saab, you had to lead from the very front, along with the Chief Minister of West Bengal, Amphan. It's an unprecedented cyclone, and now we having the international kind of recognition. It's the costliest cyclone, one of the worst cyclone to hit the world in 2020. How bad it was?
It was a nightmare, I think everyone will agree, because the wind speed was around 270 kilometers per hour. And it devastated 16 districts out of 23 districts in the whole of West Bengal. Around 22.8 million, more than 2.8 million houses were damaged. And the cost itself is phenomenal, as we have estimated around 1,04,000 crores of rupees to be incurred for rebuilding all the things in place, bringing back to place. So it was something which is unusual for itself. Anything in India, and especially West Bengal, has not seen such a cyclone in the past few centuries.
And Javed, it was so unfortunate. I know that the cyclone Bulbul had hit almost the same region about a few months back. So you had to, I know there are areas in Sundarbans where the same houses were trashed twice over. So it's really, really bad. The people in Sundarban, who about 4.5 million people living in and around Sundarban, or in Sundarban around maybe much more, is very bad. So I hope that you have a tough time at your hand.
Bulbul was merely on a very small stretch of area.
On the Sundarbans only, yes.
Sundarbans only. But this Amphan, it crossed 16 districts, and it was a havoc. It was a havoc. I was in Nabanna with the Chief Minister. We were witnessing on our control room the Amphan flurry, and I saw with my own eyes on the screen the eye of the cyclone. and the speed, and it was zooming, it was making a sound, just some very high, what you call tornado or some thing is coming down and something is happening. So after a certain while, after around 1 hour, we felt that the speed is coming slow down, but it has went over Kolkata and it has shaken the Kolkata so badly, and it passed over not only Kolkata, South 24 Gunas, North 24 Gunas, it went to Midnapur, Malda, everywhere it went, and it devastated everything in this region. The crops, the fields, the houses, the people were all shattered, and we had suffered huge on account of this.
And you mentioned about the cost. You mentioned that about 1 lakh crore was the kind of a loss. And the Christian Aid report that I referred some time back, that's also saying the cost is coming around 96,000 to 1 lakh crore. So that's close to the figure that you have been quoting. I believe you have got certain part of that from the central government so far. Not much.
Yeah, we got peanut. We can call it a peanut, because they have given only 2,700 crores rupees of the estimated, according to NDRF report or the estimates which they prepared, it was 35,000 crores rupees worth, more than 35,000 crore worth. But they have given only 2,700 crores rupees only as grant or as NDRF support. But out of that also, they have only given us till now 2,200.
So, lot are in due. I'll come back to Javed to know from you that what you are planning in future to combat such disaster. You must be having some kind of a plan and all that. So I'll come back to you after that. But before that, let me go to Saleemul Saab. Dr. Hawk, that you have heard Javed Saab saying that amount of disaster, and also I think Amphan had also impacted, Bulbul also impacted definitely Bangladesh. And now we know that this costliest cyclones are happening in the poorest parts of the world. So what's your take on that? 2020 it happens. Is it going to repeat in 2021? Dr. Hawk.
Thank you very much, Jayanta, and thank you to the other speakers for their contributions. So let me say a little bit about Amphan and cyclones more generally in the context of climate change. So in my view, the year 2020, which has just passed less than 48 hours ago, has been not only the year of COVID-19, obviously that is the big news, but it's also the year in which we have crossed over into a climate changed world. The world is now already temperature because of human-induced climate change above 1 degree centigrade compared to pre-industrial. And that is changing the whole weather system around the world. And Amphan is a very good example. You know, Amphan was a super cyclone when it was in the Bay of Bengal, as the Honorable Minister just mentioned. And it became a super cyclone because of the elevated sea surface temperature in the Bay of Bengal at that time. It was unusually hot sea surface temperature that made Amphan into a super cyclone. And that had the devastation that you just heard about in West Bengal and in India. Fortunately for Bangladesh, it hit India first and then came through the Sundarbans and hit Bangladesh, and the damage was not as much, but there's very considerable damage in Bangladesh. But I would say there is an associated good news story as well, which is that in Bangladesh, we were able to evacuate more than 2.5 million people. You know, super cyclones of this magnitude have happened in decades past. You know, in the 91, we had a big one, killed more than 100,000 people. In 73, we had one that killed over several 100,000 people. This time, the deaths were in the few dozens only. And that's because more than 2.5 million people were evacuated and took shelter. So we have one of the best early warning and shelter systems in the world, which has brought the human death, to practically zero. But still, there's still a lot of damage. And as you mentioned, the economic damage of crops and infrastructure and houses, this is real. That is enormous. And many people are not able to go back to their homes, and they're living in embankments or they're living in the slums of the cities now. So going forward, what is it that we need to be worried about? We need to be worried that this is now becoming the new normal. Before, a super cyclone would come once every 10, 20 years. The Honorable Minister said they don't have a record for a very long time for something like this. They better get used to it. It's going to happen again. We have no way to avoid it. We just have to be better prepared. We just have to be able to deal with it. And we are not the only ones. The same thing has happened in the Caribbean, where they also have regular hurricanes, they call them, in the Caribbean, which hit Central America and United States. They had so many hurricanes this year that they ran out of names. You know, they do them alphabetically. They up to 26, where they hit the letter Z, and then they had to go into the Greek alphabet to go to the number of hurricanes. They had more than 30 hurricanes hit, some of them very devastating in Central America. And they had wildfires in California and Australia. So global climate change is now becoming global, pervasive, and something we are going to have to get used to. There's no way we can avoid these things in the future. And we need to be better prepared for them.
Absolutely, we need to be better prepared for that. A very quick supplementary question. You mentioned about the US. US, I'm looking at the report. The US has the highest loss in this year. It's very, very, I think, ironic that the US under Donald Trump has always been kind of countering climate change as not the real thing. And US has the highest loss, more than 60 billion for the hurricanes, as you said, they ran out of names, and also the fire. But what is more important, Saleemul Saab, which I need your brief input before I go to Dr. Worah for other environmental issues, is that the displacement. We are talking about the cost, but Amphan only has displaced 4.9 million people, and Indian flood has displaced 4 million. So about 9 million people being displaced by this extreme weather event. So how do you see to that?
Absolutely important point, Jayanta. So in the global climate change arena under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, where the countries come together to discuss these issues, this particular issue comes under the heading of loss and damage. These are impacts that are occurring, people are losing their livelihoods, losing their homes, they're being forced to migrate. So they're effectively becoming climate migrants, although we don't use that term. We call them displaced people because of climate change, but they are effectively climate migrants. And this is not their fault. It's not even the country's fault. It's not India's fault, Bangladesh's fault. It's the polluters of the world's fault. So we need to be discussing this at the global arena, and hopefully later this year, now in November, we will have the next conference of parties of the UN Framework Convention in Glasgow in Scotland, COP26. This will be one of the issues that we, the vulnerable countries, are going to be raising there. What do we do about this climate migration that is now being forced? It's happening. We cannot ignore it anymore. And there's a global responsibility to take care of these people who are losing their homes and their livelihoods.
Absolutely. I think the areas like Sundarbans, which virtually contribute nothing to this cauldron of climate change, are being most affected, need to be discussed at the global level. And those who are responsible should compensate the areas like Sundarban, the people in Sundarban, because they are being suffering for whatever they have done. So I think I'll come back to you because we need to discuss Glasgow, and I need to go back to Javed sir. But before that, to Dr. Worah. Dr. Worah, we are talking about COVID, we are talking about climate change, but there are other issues which may be related, but there are other issues. For example, I remember that you were releasing some time back, in fact, I wrote about it, about the Global Biodiversity Report and how the biodiversity has been impacted in this period. So Dr. Worah, to you, 2020, in one side, due to COVID, the environment by default has improved a bit. But overall, how you perceive the environmental situation in 2020?
Thanks, Jayanta, and it's very interesting to hear the comments from the other speakers because actually it's all interconnected, right? There's no disconnect between what we've been talking about. The agendas of climate change, biodiversity loss, and development are completely interlinked. And until we both, in country and as a global community, start looking at the solutions also as interlinked, we are going to be doomed to sort of fighting one pandemic here, one disaster there, one sort of forest being destroyed here. And I think, it's time that we move beyond that. And I honestly think that, in 2021, if we don't make these linkages, and if we don't come out with the finance, with the solutions, the nature-based solutions, with the kind of linkages that we need amongst these and come up with a better deal, we've lost an opportunity. We'll have lost an opportunity and a huge learning that has come out of it. And while you were, so two things I want to just mention here. One is, your positivity in terms of the impacts of COVID on the environment. They are extremely short-lived. They're long gone. They were there for a very brief period. There was nothing learned from it. Everybody said, oh, it's fantastic. The Ganga is so clean and it's great. The air is so clean, but absolutely no cognizance was taken when the country started opening up again, right? Because there was this very, very difficult balance of trying to balance the economy and trying to balance, the environmental gains that were got. So, and obviously the environment lost out, as it always does. So, the challenge that we have in front of us is how do we reverse this? And I think one way to reverse it, so, I can give you all the gloom and doom figures. We can talk about how 75% of terrestrial environments have been altered, how 66% of marine environments have been altered, how we've lost 85% of our wetlands, all that, the gloom and doom stuff is always there. But I think we need to turn it around. And, while you were talking about the loss from disasters, we should also start talking about nature services and how much it contributes to the economy. So for example, if you look at just, services of nature, it contributes up to US dollars 125 trillion per year. If you look at the services of natural ecosystems. Now, we've never captured that.
Yes.
Similarly, if you look at, half the global GDP is dependent on nature. And this has been calculated by the World Economic Forum. Half the global GDP depends on natural resources. Okay, this we don't look at. Similarly, we've been talking about green growth, green jobs. We've been saying when we turn around and we look at 2021 and we look at a different kind of economic model, if we try to look at a more green economic model, there are also calculations that say up to 400 million jobs can be created, just green jobs, from turning it around. So unless we as a global community start thinking differently about, how we want to go forward in terms of the climate crisis, in terms of the biodiversity crisis, and in terms of the health crisis, they're completely interlinked. And if we don't seize this opportunity and do something differently, I'm afraid, the next pandemic is not far. The next cyclone and hurricane is not far. And we are, we are going to go into this cycle and then figure out, how do we deal with this? What's the economic loss? And then start going around to say who pays for it. And that's been the sort of sticking point also in all the global talks. And Dr. Huck knows this very well. That, the whole issue of who pays for it becomes the major driving force of the discussions, rather than thinking about a futuristic model of where do we want to go. We get locked into this whole cycle of money. We have to get out of that. And that is my, my vision for 2021 is we've got the climate COP coming up. We've got the biodiversity COP coming up. We've got the SDGs coming up for review. It's time to link all of this and think about a future where it's not.
In fact, hearing you, I just kind of going back to something it was discussed some time back. Do we need actually separate COP for climate change or biodiversity, or do we need a single COP which will take care of these linkages? I think I'll come back to you, because this is a very, very critical question need to be answered. Dr. Hawk, I think sometime we are keeping this climate change as a standalone thing, cut off from the rest of the environment. I think that is not going to work. We need to, as Dr. Worah pointed out, we need to link those dots if we need to have a sustainable solution. But before that, to Javed Sahab again. Javed Sahab, you talked about the damages that Amphan had done. You also mentioned about the bulbul and other things. Now, Dr. Hawk has been pointing out, Dr. Worah has been pointing out that these are going to, unless we have a sustainable solution, unless we link the dots and try to find out a common solution, these are going to increase. So under this situation, what do you think, how the government of West Bengal plans to counter this future? Are you building on the social infrastructure? Are you building on the physical infrastructure to counter disaster issues? Javed Sahab, what's the plan?
Very good question. Indeed, we are working on all fields, both social and both infrastructure development. Everything is going on. But everything has to be linked together. Otherwise, only a state like West Bengal takes an initiative for anything like disaster management, and the other partners, the other states or other countries, they don't look after it, then it will. Sundarban is an example. If we don't tie up with Bangladesh to address Sundarban problems, it cannot be solved overnight. No, neither India can gain, neither Bangladesh can gain. So we have to work together, and for the future generation, for the future of the world, we have to work together and link everything together. My from our state side, what we are doing, we are definitely, I don't say we have done a lot of things, but we have done definitely some things that has been a source of strength for us. Like we have made infrastructure development, we have made shelters, we have made embankments, we have made roads, we have planted trees, we have made what you call zonal godowns, and we stored things in that. We have imparted stakeholder trainings for this type of disaster like cyclones and floods and everything. So it has to be done, both social and both from the government side. It has to, everyone has to, every stakeholder has to come together. Otherwise, it is not possible. Like, what in this Amphan we have learned that only man management has not to be done. Everything has to be put in place. Our Amphan planning was done because we have got a notice beforehand. Yes. But if it would have been sudden, then I think all the planning would have failed. And likewise in Bangladesh, they have been able to reduce the mortalities rate. In our side also, we have evacuated more than 1 million people from the coastal area and the vulnerable areas, and we have been able to prevent deaths. Only in double digit it is there. 99 people died due to this because the thrust was on West Bengal. So we have done it. But definitely more has to be done, because from the government side and from the stakeholder side also, people nowadays also, they don't want to leave their place or their residence. This is a very big problem. We cannot convince them. We ask them that floods are coming. You come to safe places. They say, no, we will not go. We will be there. So loss of life, we have used force. We have asked police to evacuate them. We have done it. But how many times? It has to be spontaneous from their side also. Yes. Like in the Amphan cyclone, we have learned that we have to have a mechanism to restore electricity, to restore embankments, to restore road connections and connectivity. We have to have that. And with that, we have to have the manpower also, and we have to get prepared for all eventualities.
Okay. So it's a quick question, then I'll take the same question to Dr. Hawk. Is that, do you think, as we all know, that the larger countries, the industrialized countries, they are predominantly responsible for this emission and whatever the world is facing right now? Now, don't you think that these countries, maybe in some form, we call it loss and damage, we call it insurance or whatever, these countries should take, just like the corporate social responsibility, the country's social responsibility, they should take some responsibility for supporting these poor people who have done nothing for the climate change increase, both in like the India, Bangladesh, or other countries who are suffering. Don't you think that should be the kind of an option, Javed sir?
Definitely, it should be an option. But my point is that we have to have our resources in order. Otherwise, we cannot do it.
That is very important.
If our resources are not, like our government has planned a health card for all the inhabitants of West Bengal. It is the 9.5 crores of people here living in West Bengal. We have planned a cashless health card for all the people. So this will help the poor people also, the people in the city also. So this way we are doing it. But more trees has to be planted, more effluent treatment plant has to be made in the industrial estates, more logistic problems has to be solved. Like we don't have roads somewhere in the villages still now. We have remote villages in the island of the Sundarbans. That has to be accessed, how to access it and how to be linked with the mainland. That has to be planned. And this only the government can do it, but the stakeholders should also be there. They should be trained and they should be convinced that the government is doing, and they should come out with their solution also.
As you said that perhaps India, Bangladesh, kind of Bonhomie, kind of a collaboration is required for Sundarban. I think, I know that you have been leading that for last many years. That should go to a logical conclusion somewhere down the line. Thank you. I'll come back to you because I need to know more from you from that end. But Saleem sir, the issue of insurance, or we call it loss and damage, just we mentioned that about 4.9 million have been kind of uprooted from their homes during the Amphan. It's one of the largest displacement in the world. And still we are talking about whether that's technically migration can be called or not. We are word in talks, we are word in words, but these people are suffering. So don't you think that this Glasgow, this real issues need to come forward? We often talk about those not so real issues in this climate COPs. Don't you think the time is up to talk about the real issues?
Absolutely correct. I think, time is absolutely up and we need to be concrete. So let me start with one or two global items that we have already agreed. So, the rich countries had agreed 5 years ago in Paris at the Paris Agreement to provide $100 billion a year starting from this year, 2020. The time ran out on 31st December. They did not deliver 100 billion. We don't even know how much they delivered, but certainly did not deliver 100 billion. And they promised 100 billion every year. So there should be another 100 billion this year in 2021. And they're nowhere near delivering that. So they need to be held to account. There is some excuse in that President Trump refused to give any money. But now that we have President-elect Biden coming in from 20th of January, we expect the United States to actually contribute to that and to make up the 100 billion. So making pledges at the global level, even when they make promises, they don't deliver. So you're quite right. How much of this talk can we carry on without doing things on the ground? So we need to be holding them to account to the extent that we can hold them to account. The other issue, I think that Honorable Minister has made a good point. We have to have our own house in order. Yes. If our own house is not in order, then blaming other people is not really going to get us anywhere. And by our own house, we mean both India and Bangladesh. We are the Sundarban is our common heritage. It's a global ecosystem of World Heritage Site, but it's our common responsibility. We should be working together. We should be collaborating on the ground to both protect the ecosystem and protect the people who are dependent on the ecosystem. And we have not done a good job, quite frankly. We have done some things, but we have not done anywhere near what we should be doing. So that is our responsibility. And then the third and final thing I would say that even at the very local level, for us as individuals in our own institutions and our own professions, we have a role to play. And we need to be playing that role more effectively. And I would argue we have not done. So, you and I we are friends from across the border. We talk a lot. We come together on these occasions. We promise to do things. We do maybe a little bit of things, but we also are not doing as much as we could do. And I would definitely want to see how we can join forces more effectively, move others to join with us more effectively, and get this level of collective action going from the bottom up rather than depending on it from the top down. I don't have much faith in the top down. I want them to do it. I will engage with them and argue with them and advocate, but I don't have faith. I have faith in people, ourselves. If we actually start doing things, I have great faith that we can do things. Thank you.
Okay, in fact, while hearing you, I remember what Jairam Ramesh once told me that when this funding of the fast track funding was talked about, he said they were neither fast nor on track. So that's the kind of situation. So in fact, I'll again talk about this. Yes, I do completely agree with you that perhaps the time is now really up for like the countries like India and Bangladesh to talk about Sundarban, not only talk, but work on Sundarban together. It's a win-win scenario. It's not like Tista water. It's not like taking one resource to another. It's like a win-win scenario. But before that, to Dr. Worah again. Dr. Worah, again, you talked about joining the dots. You talked about this collaborating. These issues are not really standalone. These are common issues. Now, WWF is a international organization working in all these sectors. How you feel in 2021? Not only WWF, there is Greenpeace, there are ActionAid, the civil society, because as Dr. Hawk pointed out, not much hope on the top. So we need to work, the civil society need to work together. What's your take on that? How you can take it forward? You mean the whole civil society agglomeration can take it forward? Dr. Worah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good point. The first thing that civil society, and I'm talking about civil society now, both at national and global level, needs to do is it needs to talk in one voice. And unfortunately, a lot of civil society does not talk in one voice. And as a result, a lot of our good intentions get dissipated. So I think the first thing we need to do with this, Agenda 2021 that you're talking about, is we need to get together and ask for one common outcome. And that is happening. There is mobilization now among some of the larger civil society organizations around this idea of a New Deal for nature, which brings together, climate, SDGs, and the CBD COP to say, how do we actually come up with a combination where we are really talking about a really strong, good New Deal for nature. So I think that is gaining momentum. Heads of state have given a global agreement. Several heads of state got together in September and signed and stated these things. So but these are all symbolic, these are all sort of symbolic actions, which are also important because at the end of the day, that is what builds up the momentum. But I completely agree with everybody else on this panel that, it's time now to move beyond the symbolism and beyond the words into action. Because if we don't do it now, honestly speaking, I cannot think, the pandemic that we've gone through and the year that we've gone through with the natural disasters, I cannot think of a more perfect storm for countries to come together and say, this is it, we draw the line here. And this is where we actually start talking in a different way and a different voice, not over the petty issues, but over the big picture. And honestly, I feel if we don't do it, then we've, as I said, we've lost this opportunity. So I think civil society has a very, very important role to play in just galvanizing public opinion, because at the end of the day, many governments listen to the public opinion. So I don't think we've done a very good job on that. I think in a way we failed to actually get civil society and the public to understand the linkages between what is going on, the linkages between your own economic development, because human beings are selfish by nature. Right? So we're all going to be looking at our own personal development, our own personal gains. We've not been able to communicate that your future, your children's future, is actually dependent on the actions that your government and the global community takes in the coming years, in terms of your health, in terms of the environment, in terms of climate. These are all interconnected with your own well-being. And we've not been able to make that link, because if people saw that their well-being is actually directly impacted, they are going to take action and demand action from their government.
Absolutely.
Right? And so the health crisis, so COVID in a way, because it impacted you so directly and so visibly, see the way governments reacted. See the way we brought a vaccine together within a record time.
Exactly.
See the way everybody collaborated.
Very, very important.
We did not see that for climate change. We didn't see that for climate change because it's a long-term risk. And we don't think
so it can wait. So it can wait.
It can wait. But it can't wait anymore because it's interconnected. The loss of nature and pandemics is directly connected. Climate change and the loss of nature is directly connected. These are, so this is what we keep saying, they're interconnected. And unless we have an interconnected solution, we will, solve one problem but create another.
Absolutely. So it's a very, very fascinating point. Professor Dasgupta, you need to unmute yourself. Dr. Worah has just spoken about the need to link all those, say, COVID and environment, climate change, and everything together. So when COVID happened, everybody within this record 6 months, 7 months time, you have come up with the vaccine. But when the climate change we all know is going to impact the world, perhaps kind of and take the world in a position that it is no longer livable. The world is on course to a 3-degree temperature rise at the end of this century. Still the politicians across the world are just waiting and watching. So what do you think, Professor Dasgupta? Do we need more stronger linkages of health and environment, climate change to trigger the political system across the world to act in a more proactive manner? Professor Dasgupta.
Yes, sure. I can't agree with her more. So in one sense, the focus is back on One Health. Again, One Health was, in a sense, promoted by the veterinary world, and the human public health counterparts weren't really engaged with it, and environment has actually been its weakest pillar. And COVID, or rather the challenge of emerging infections, up to an estimated 70% of them are linked to both zoonosis as well as environmental challenges, has brought One Health back into focus. That's the good news. The bad news, if I may, again, I'm speaking purely from the Indian point of view. it's more than 6 months. Indeed, it's about 7 months that the national government actually set up a One Health expert committee. But as far as news in the media, sorry, as far as available news is concerned in the public domain, I haven't come across that this committee having met at least once or have undergone deliberations to take on these challenges that she was talking of. And I suspect that would be true more or less of the region as well.
Absolutely. I think that's again that's priority. The priority comes into the picture. Javed sir, you have been in the politics for so many decades now. And I know that there are people like you who are down the line have started taking interest in the environmental related issues. But in general, politicians don't consider environment important. Let me say that in a platform that politicians don't consider environment as an issue. So when air pollution is impacting Delhi or Kolkata, that does not become an issue in the election. No political parties in manifestos, we find that environment is a real issue. So what really, so when COVID happened, everybody, all political people across the world, across the country are jumping on it. But when we are talking about climate change, we know that Amphan coming from that, there's hardly any response. What is the problem in mindset of the politicians? Try to understand that, Javed sir.
Actually, the people, I think, are at fault, because if the people raise hue and cry, like in corona cases, everyone was very self-defensive.
So immediate response.
Immediate response. So people has to be more spontaneous and alert, and they should raise these questions. So the politicians are forced to work and to find a remedy. Otherwise, everyone is like in corona. Everyone was very much in a very high alert. That's if I go near some corona patient, I will get infected by corona. Now the medical science or the WHO has come that no, it is not contagious disease, so you can go and meet anyone and you can work together. So people have put down the curtains. Now no one is trying to wear masks. No one is trying to maintain social distance, and no one is going. So their alertness has come down because their safety, they think in corona cases also, you don't have to worry about it. So in these cases also, if everything is not linked together, global warming, 23 cities are going to get drowned in the seas. Calcutta is also in the list of the cities. Bombay is there.
High on the list.
High on the list. Bangladesh is there. So we are not worried. Sundarban is a heritage item. It is a heritage thing. And no one is worried about Sundarban. And similarly, we are not worried about Calcutta or Bangladesh or Dhaka or Mumbai. We are not worried. Because when it happens, then it is too late to make anything possible. So it is high time we should work together to protect and infuse this kind of thing into the public mind. Public awareness should be created more. Otherwise, without awareness, public awareness, nothing goes and nothing happens. In my opinion, the politicians are only not to be blamed. The society, civil society, doesn't come up with issues and they don't force us, nothing will change. This is my own opinion.
Absolutely fascinating. Dr. Hogg, I think Javed Sahab has made a point that the society needs to push the politician. And it's a chicken and egg scenario. Who will be doing first push and who will be taking the push? So what's your take on that? It's what you pointed out, when the hue and cry is there, politicians have to think about 5 years. They normally don't think about beyond 5 years. So be it Donald Trump or be it Narendra Modi or be it anybody, they think about the smaller duration. And that sometimes plays a hindrance for the larger long-term planning. So what's the prescription? As you have been seeing these politicians, working with them for a long time. How this mindset can be changed? How can in the future in 2021 we can work on that?
So I don't have a magic wand solution, Jayanta.
At least direction.
But I will tell you where I put most of my faith. And as I said, I don't put it in the politicians. I put it in young people. So, you know, I'm a teacher in a university. my students are the best and the brightest, and they really want change. They want to do things. They have energy. They want to correct injustices. They want to fight against injustice and corruption and bad things and protect the environment. All of these are things that young people have in their energy and in their blood, but then they lose it after a while, and they become cynical and they just go along with the normal way. We need to harness that energy and not let it get dissipated. And I think we can do that. And I will point to one example of a 16-year-old schoolgirl in Sweden, in Stockholm, Greta Thunberg. One girl, she took a placard and she sat in front of the Stockholm Parliament in Stockholm and sat just by herself. She didn't go around shouting and telling people what to do. She just sat there and said, "This is wrong. I am not going to go to school every Friday. I'm just going to sit here with my placard and say this is wrong." And now there are millions of school kids all over the world, the School Kids for Friday movement. We have a huge number of them here in Bangladesh. Every Friday they are demonstrating, they do these big movements and they are pushing their politicians. And let me give you an example of how this has succeeded. The President-elect Biden, when he ran for president, he did not take climate change seriously at all. You know, amongst the Democratic candidates, he was not a climate change proponent. His young people forced him to do it. The progressive movement of young people in the United States forced Biden to take climate change seriously. And the good thing about him is he's convinced. Now he believes it. Now he didn't before though. Now he does. And he has appointed John Kerry as his climate envoy, who, he negotiated the Paris Agreement, very, very well-known architect of the Paris Agreement. He has appointed domestic leaders who are going to take action. So we are much more hopeful now with the Biden administration coming in that not only it won't be rhetoric anymore, it will be actual practice of investing in the right things. And that has to come from the politicians who are in charge of the budgets and the money. You know, if they don't put the money where their mouth is, they talk the right thing, but then they don't do the right thing. But we have to force them to do that and hold them to account. When they promise to do something, then they have to do it. Okay. They can't just get away with not doing it.
Okay, I think I'll have some time to come back to you once more to know about what's your specific expectation from the Glasgow. But before that, to Dr. Worah again. Dr. Worah, what's your take? This is a fascinating discussion taking up how the politician's mindset and how whether you work with the politician. End of the day, they are the decision makers. They are being voted into the power to work for the people. So you need to take them on. It's not that you need to take them with you. Not really take them on. You have to take them with you. You have to convince them. That's why every year IPCC, after a few years, come up with this document for the politicians to execute. So how you, as an environmental executive, Dr. Worah, think about integrating the politicians, knowing their mindset, into the process in future?
So I'll tell you, I think this is, and I'll very honestly say, I think this is where we have failed, because what we have done. We've tried to mobilize civil society and says that if the people speak, the politicians will listen. It's not quite as simple as that equation, because people have been speaking for a long time and have been ignored as well for a very long time. So I can tell you, for every successful movement, I can give you 10,000. Maybe people need to
speak strong enough.
10,000 which have failed. We have protested, we have done this, we have done that, we have done marches, we have done whatever you name, but at the end of the day, this has been overruled. So I think it's not just about that. It really is about, as you said, taking the politicians with you. It's about not necessarily being confrontational all the time, because confrontations don't necessarily help, because there's always going to be a counter confrontation. When you confront, there'll be a counter confrontation, and then it'll just become, it becomes a disaster. I mean, you see what's going on in India right now with confrontation. It's not a scenario that's going to have a happy ending. So I think it really is about taking people with you. And I also feel that that's where we've not got the message out in a way that's, that's understandable and affects people. To me, it's a mystery. I actually am baffled at the psyche of people living in North India, for example, who are confronted with this enormous pollution risk every year. Your health is severely being impacted. You're losing productivity. Your children are actually sick. And you know that there's so much of asthma and sickness that, people can't live in these places anymore. And even then you're not getting up and demanding action.
Absolutely.
Which is what I find amazing. So, and still when I talk to normal people, in Delhi, saying, aren't you bothered? Yeah, I'm really bothered. I'm living now in a sealed room with air purifiers, that's what life has become. So you keep adapting yourself to the negativity rather than actually demanding a positive change. So there's also a sense of apathy, I think, which we also need to confront. And I'm fantastically very, very thrilled to hear Dr. Haq talking about his students and these youngsters. Yes, they're there. And yes, I completely agree. How do we harness that energy? I think that is what we have to make our agenda. People in my generation now, I just feel, my time is over. I've fought as much as I could fight. Now it's to the next generation. So how do we actually harness that energy? How do we make it positive? And how do we actually take the politicians along with you so that they actually, are making the right decisions. So I think for us, that is the challenge of the future.
I think the time is not over. Everybody has to contribute in his own way. So nobody's time is over. Everybody's time is there. All the time to be integrated. Professor Dasgupta, you've been working with the politicians for quite some time. Very fascinating this discussion is turning out to be. What is the prescription of working with the politicians in a positive way?
Well, the prescription I always quote, and that's something I've inherited from my teachers, is to quote Rudolf Virchow, a genius in his own right, and in fact, the proponent of the concept of One Health, what he called at that time One Medicine. And in this quote, medicine is synonymous with what we would call health. And I'll just read it out. So he underscored the inseparability of medicine, read public health, from politics. And this is how he articulated: medicine is a social science and politics is nothing else but medicine on a large scale. Medicine as a social science, as the science of human beings, has the obligation to point out problems and to attempt their theoretical solution. And here comes the punchline. The politician, what he calls very significantly, the practical anthropologist, and I believe the politician is indeed the practical anthropologist, must find the means for their actual solution. And I'm really glad that Minister Khan is not denying that at all. In fact, he's certainly contributing and reinforcing this position, if I've understood him correctly.
No, absolutely. I think that's very fascinating. But end of the day, whatever we say, end of the day, we need to, as I said repeatedly, we need to bring the politician on board, because they are the people who are officially mandated to run the countries. We cannot deny that. That's an official position. And my understanding is that sometimes the adequate convincing, as Dr. Hogg also pointed out, that we also need to do the adequate work. The civil society also perhaps need to do more sometimes to push politicians to work as big the President-elect Biden was forced to do by the younger generation. So I think that's fascinating. We have about 3-4 minutes time, and I'll come to the last round of questions. First to Javed Saab, how do you expect 2021 to come out to be? What's your expectation? People say that 2020, now we are in new year, new hope. But I say that yes, we have new hope, but the point is viruses may not have the same calendar that we have. They may have a different calendar. So according to their calendar, you never know that the year has ended or not. So what's the hope point, Javed Saab, in 2021?
We are very hopeful, and we should be prepared for that, for any challenges. That is my mantra. Otherwise, keeping your curtains down and thinking always that you can do something, it is not possible. You have to be prepared for everything. And we always hope for the best. And 2021 will definitely add to our experience of 2020 and will work much more efficiently and better than 2020.
And you expect that in 2021 Glasgow Climate Conference, I hope that UK will be kind of okay to hold the conference now. This second strain and all these are coming up. bit confused. But you expect that Glasgow will be talking about these issues like Sundarbans, and perhaps in this year, perhaps we, as Dr. Hogg very aptly pointed out, we are talking so much, we are not really acting. We'll be acting in a much more proactive manner for Sundarban. I think definitely your role and your kind of input is very important in that. What's your take on that?
It is time to work. It is time to hope for the best. And I think if we don't lose time and not lose faith in us, then we can be able to do anything.
Absolutely. I think that's extremely encouraging. Dr. Hogg, same question, but before that, very quickly, if you say that in Glasgow, what's your expectation? In a pointed way, what your expectation from Glasgow? Taking into consideration, I asked the same question to the rest of the panelists as well, that this COVID, it is expected that post-COVID, huge amount of money will be rolled into COVID. So whether the money will be there for environment and climate change is a big, big question. So Dr. Hogg, your point on that.
Thank you very much, Jayanta. So as you have followed these annual conferences of parties for many years as well, you know, some are big and important and some are less important. I think COP26 in Glasgow will be one of the most important, similar to Paris. It has to be, if we are going to do anything solid or significant. If we fail to do that, if it's just another incremental COP, we just agreed to a few small things, it will not serve the purpose and it will actually devalue the entire COP process. But if I may also add another point with respect to the earlier conversation on how to convince politicians and leaders to do the right thing. I think one of the very important lessons to be learned is just experience, looking at what is happening. And 2020 has given us a real life experiment. All over the world, we had a major outbreak of a pandemic. Every country had to think about what to do and had to take action. Some did quickly, some did slow, some did X, some did Y. But if you look at all the countries and the leaders that were most successful, every single leader of a country that was successful, let us take New Zealand, let us take Taiwan, these countries' leaders listened to their scientists and they acted quickly according to what the scientists told them to do. Leaders that did not listen to their scientists, and the United States is the biggest example, they are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of their own citizens.
Absolutely.
These were not necessary deaths. These were unnecessary deaths caused by leaders who failed to act in the interests of listening to their scientists. So this thing that we had in 1 year, squeezed into 1 year on COVID-19, is relevant for the decades to come on climate change. If the leaders are not going to listen to the scientists, and we as scientists, we have been telling them what to do for a long time now, if they fail to listen, they are going to be responsible for havoc that later on when it becomes a crisis, there will not be much we can do about it.
Absolutely. I think there's no stronger and adequate word for that. Dr. Worah, what's your point on that? You think on the same line that politicians have learned enough in COVID-19, as Dr. Hogg pointed out, that politicians and the leaders who have heard the kind of scientists and has acted accordingly, their countries have been much safer than the countries which have not heard. Like Donald Trump, we all always go to quote, favorite quote of ours. What's your point on Dr. Worah?
So, yeah, I mean, I completely agree that, you know, if you have good science today, and we have good science on everything, on most things. We have good science also on, you know, as I said, the linkages. And if we are not going to act on that science, then, you know, I mean, look at the US. It's amazing to me is how much the price that they're paying for this, you know, it's not ignorance. It's actually, it's deliberate ignorance. That's the scary part of it. It's not like you don't know what's happening. You know what's going to happen and you're deliberately ignoring it. And you're seeing the price that you're paying. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm you know, following Javed sir's sort of lead and saying, you know, I'm hopeful that in the next year, because it, you know, it can't get worse. You can't have
get worse.
You can't have a worse year and a worse example. I mean, do you really want to repeat this? No, we don't want to repeat it. So I think the trilogy of sort of climate action, you know, no further loss of habitat. I mean, you know, this is one of the things we are demanding. as an environmental organization, we're just basically saying zero further loss of habitat. We have already lost 75% of the world's habitat. We cannot afford to lose anymore. So let's draw the line. And that's the sort of hope and the demand that we need to make is let's draw the line on 2020.
This much and no further.
2021 has to be different from 2020 because if we don't draw the line, then honestly, I think it's a tipping point. It's a tipping point, and you mentioned that climate change, we're tipping. It's there. And if we don't heed the call now, then I'm not sure we'll have another chance.
Hearing all of you, it looks like a make or break year. 2021 is going to be a make or break year, and Glasgow Climate Conference may be a make or break climate conference. Professor Dasgupta, ending with you, we all have to learn to live with COVID. I think even with vaccines, you just cannot take away your mask in a public place once you have the vaccine. Please tell us that how we are going to live this next year, not the next, no, this year, 2021.
Well, I don't claim to have the wisdom to give you the last word. If 2020 was the year of the virus, we believe that 21 is the year of the vaccine, but not quite so. I would really take it with some cautious optimism. And as you very rightly said, other measures will need to be in force. At the same time, since the theme in this segment is about politics, about working with politicians, one view, of course, is, as Professor Huck outlined, how the leadership, how the political leadership interacts and views the technical and the scientific leadership. But as another columnist, a political scientist to be specific, put it, that there are those countries who think the government is the problem, and there are those countries where people think the government is the solution. And it's really those countries where people believe that the government is the solution have done well in that particular analysis. But I would go a step further, and that's based on my experience of working both with the government as well as within the government in my previous job, that politicians across party lines, this got nothing to do with party, can really have indeed make fantastic positive contributions, but only when we act in synergy with the politicians. And the technocrats and the scientists cannot take or should not rather take a holier than thou attitude, but really work in synergy with politicians. And that's what makes things stick. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Absolutely fascinating. I think this Agenda 21, pandemic and beyond, when I started this program, I never thought that we'll be going in such great depths into the mindset of politicians. I have thought about rather questions, and now I look up to the questions and say that we have discussed much better and much bigger than actually we were supposed to. Yes, I think what Javed Saab said is a very interesting point, that he said that along with the Chief Minister, I was looking at the eye of the cyclone. I think when the Chief Minister of a state, along with the Disaster Affairs Minister of the state, in person look towards the cyclone and feel that this is coming, and this is coming one after one, Bulbul and then Amphan, they must be now wiser enough to counter the climate change. I'm very confident in my mind that when this experience, because politicians all said and done have enormous experience at ground level. So they see this. I think I personally hope 2021 will be better in that sense. Politicians will be better off in their experience of not countering climate change in an adequate way. They know for sure that what is going to happen. I personally feel that this COVID is like a vaccine to climate change. That if you can kind of counter COVID, you know how to counter the bigger problem of climate change. That's a much, much bigger problem. And I'm also very hopeful with these words with Dr. Hawk and Javed Saab and also all the panelists, Dr. Worah and Professor Dasgupta, is that we need the collaboration. We need the collaboration, not necessarily India, Bangladesh, and Sundarban. Also, perhaps the South Asian level. We have heard from Professor Dasgupta how the vaccine collaboration is happening. So let this collaboration take off. Politicians will be there to run the countries, but let them be wiser in 2021, and let we have a better world in this year. With all this hope, we are concluding here. Another day, another time. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Goodbye, everybody.
While much of the world stays home, Canada's fertilizer industry keeps working to ensure the food we depend on grows better and stronger. Because without fertilizer, harvests would be cut in half. The nutrients in soil must be replenished for the next harvest. To recover from this crisis, the world depends on us. We secure tomorrow's food